Also, today marks 19 years since the September 11th terrorist attacks in New York, D.C., and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Another year, but the horror of that day and the pain are still here. In Lower Manhattan, a city which promised to never forget, paused to remember. Keeping alive the memories of the nearly 3,000 who died in the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. The heroic rescuers who died trying to save them, and those who have passed in the years since from exposure to the toxic chemicals that engulfed the area for months.
Michael Rourke Andrews.
But this year, the remembrances are different. COVID-19 forcing crowd sizes to be limited, hand sanitizer and masks plentiful. Vice President Mike Pence and Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden attended the Ground Zero service, where organizers decided for the first time not to have family members read the names of the fallen in order to maintain social distancing. Instead, playing a recording of victims' names.
Luis Alfonso Chimbo.
That decision spurred a charity group to hold a separate commemoration, with family members reading the names live, just steps away.
For the families, loved ones, and friends they left behind.
At the Pentagon, Secretary of Defense Mark Esper attended a wreath ceremony dedicated to the 184 who died there. A giant American flag covering the spot where the hijacked plane crashed into the building. And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, President Trump joined the family members of those who died on United Flight 93 for a private memorial service.
To the family members of Flight 93, today every heartbeat in America is wedded to yours. Your pain and anguish is the shared grief of our whole nation.
Christine Burton Basmajan.
And late this afternoon, presidential candidate Joe Biden also visited Shanksville with his wife Jill, where the two laid a wreath at the memorial's Wall of Names. And tonight at sundown, just like they do every year on this day, two blue beams will light up the sky from Lower Manhattan. They'll remain on until sunrise.